If you happen to be an aspiring pilot, would you prefer to fly a 737 or a 777? And on the Airbus side, would you prefer an A320 or an A350? We're going to take a wild guess and say that many people watching would opt for those larger aircraft. Indeed, many pilots dream of flying heavy jets at the outset of their aviation journey. Of course, this is usually at the later end of the journey, with pilots often working their way up from smaller aircraft. Once at the airlines and in a position to fly a widebody, transitioning from flying narrow-body jets to widebodies comes with various stipulations and considerations. This video will discuss the general timeline for a pilot to fly a widebody and the licensing and operational differences that come with flying larger transport category jets. Being in a position to fly a wide-body plane requires a lot of conditions to be met. Foremost, a pilot needs to work for an airline that operates wide-bodies in the first place. No matter how senior a pilot is at Southwest, Ryanair or EasyJet, they will, in all likelihood, never have the opportunity to fly wide-bodies simply because those airlines do not operate heavies. The stipulation exists only in the case of a merger or if the pilot decides to leave for another airline. For example, Alaska Airlines pilots might be able to fly Boeing Dreamliners and Airbus A330s if and only if the US government approves the proposed merger with Hawaiian Airlines. Another condition that pilots need to meet to fly widebodies is the ability to bid for and hold a widebody category. Historically, it takes considerable seniority to hold either the left or right seat of a widebody at major airlines. Pilots at airlines like British Airways, American Airlines, Qantas, etc. generally have to be on the seniority list for at least 5 years to hold the most junior first officer positions on the company's respective widebodies, and sometimes much longer than this. This has been much the case for the past few decades. However, in recent times, more junior pilots have been able to hold widebody categories. New hire pilots at Delta Airlines, United Airlines and Hawaiian Airlines have received initial assignments on mixed Boeing 757/767 fleets and Airbus A330 fleets. This is due to many factors, primarily the Boeing's age and post-pandemic hiring frenzies that shook up seniority lists. Additionally, pilots who are hired by airlines that only fly widebodies, Emirates, Virgin Atlantic, Air Tahiti Nui, can only be assigned to widebodies no matter their seniority. Cargo pilots also tend to fly widebodies exclusively, with only a few 757s and 737s mixed into global cargo fleets. The training required to fly heavy jets is more or less the same as type rating courses for narrowbodies. Aircraft systems are very similar, and the approach speeds you fly at are the same, or slower if a pilot is coming off the 737. Additionally, the maneuvers pilots perform on check rides are precisely the same: flapless landings, engine failures, non-precise approaches, etc. The main difference in training is covering oceanic operations if the fleet flies internationally. Flying widebodies is much more similar to flying narrowbodies than it is different. As pilots often say, a plane is a plane. Of course, every type handles differently, and so this takes some getting used to, but learning the procedures, flows, and checklists takes more brain power and studying than actually learning how to manipulate the controls properly. One notable difference with widebodies is how they handle heavy takeoffs. A plane with 10+ hours of fuel and full passenger and cargo manifests is near its maximum takeoff weight. The margins between flap overspeed and underspeed/stall are usually slimmer on widebodies compared to narrowbodies. Pilots must heed what the flight director commands when making the initial climbing turns after departure while the flaps are still extended. Oceanic flying requires additional simulator and ground training sessions. Specifically, pilots need to learn how ETOPS procedures are performed. They will also need to learn how to fly on tracks and oceanic routes, and cover the operation specifications under which their airline flies. Another consideration that takes time to become accustomed to is flying in augmented crews, where there are more than 2 pilots. Each crew member has specific duties, many clearly delineated, while others are tacit. Performing all of one's duties and understanding the etiquette of augmented crew operations takes some time and mentorship after a pilot completes training and is in the actual operating environment during revenue service. When it comes to making that jump, transitioning from narrowbody to widebody flying is perhaps most easy for pilots transitioning from the Airbus A320 family to the Airbus A330. The flight decks of all the subtypes within these two fleets look nearly identical, and this is because Airbus intentionally designed their planes to have high levels of fidelity with each other. Certain aviation authorities allow airlines that operate both fleets to have cross-crew qualifications and short courses for pilots who have flown one of the types to easily transition to the other. This reduces an initial type rating training footprint from a month to about a week and a half. The operational differences in training that come with long-haul flying still exist, but the literal learning of how to fly is very straightforward for Airbus pilots. This will even allow for what Airbus calls mixed fleet flying, or MFF. According to the company, MFF is unique to Airbus aircraft. It enables pilots to be certified to operate more than one type from the Airbus fly-by-wire product line on a regular and concurrent basis. This is the result of flight deck and aircraft control system commonality. The A220 is the standout exception when discussing cockpit commonality and similarities across Airbus family aircraft. Most of you will know that this is the result of the A220 being designed by Bombardier, with the program later being acquired by Airbus. On the Boeing side, there is a fair bit of commonality between wide bodies, and of course a great deal of commonality across generations of 737 aircraft, but it doesn't seem like the American plane maker is as well known for having similar flight decks across all families of aircraft. At the same time, one notable Boeing narrow-body wide-body pair where the transition is easier is the 757 and 767, as the two families of aircraft share a common type rating. But at the end of the day, learning to fly wide bodies after already having flown narrow bodies at the airlines is pretty straightforward. It's not the flying part of the job that changes, but the operation itself. The most significant learning curve for a pilot is learning how operations at the airline level work, whether coming from a military or civilian background. Once a pilot understands airline operations, learning to fly different planes within the environment is relatively straightforward. So what do you think about the factors surrounding the transition from flying narrow-body aircraft to wide-body aircraft? Share your thoughts by leaving a comment down below. Simple Flying publishes over 150 articles every week. If you're looking for the latest aviation news and insights, visit simpleflying.com.